Pranakasha livestream.
Hi folks, it's Matt from Pranakasha Productions, and today we're going all composer music land, and we're going to interview Paul Safar, a Cascadian composer who lives in Oregon, right? Is that true?
Correct. In
Yeah.
Eugene.
Eugene, Oregon.
You got it.
And I'm, of course, Matt from Seattle, and I'm also a composer, in case you guys don't know that. So we got lots to talk shop. So right off the bat, did you have any association with the University of Oregon?
You know, I came out here originally about 28 years ago to do a master's program in music composition at the University of Oregon. And I got about a year into it and I didn't finish it.
Okay.
And I don't feel bad about it. I did for a little while. But it got me here. It got me in the community. I had a good year. It just wasn't the right fit, right time in my life. And I ended up, being more of a freelance person, not the academic music route. So,
okay. The reason why I asked
I
is
noticed
because
we're probably about a similar vintage.
yeah, I know Professor Owen, and darn it, I can't remember his name.
Hal,
yeah, Harold Owen.
Hal, like
Owen.
the computer, the computer.
I know Hal. He's a friend of mine. I actually stayed at his house several times because
Nice
we played.
Connection. Yes,
he's a really nice guy, and he was in his 80s. I don't know if he's still alive or not. You know,
it's been a while since I've seen him. I used to see him at concerts, maybe up until about, pre-pandemic, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he seemed like he was still fine. I think he's still alive. I think so. I will double check. I even taught piano to his grandson for a little while. It's a small town. And I did take lessons. I took lessons from him. He's fantastic with his counterpoint. I've got his counterpoint, Hal Owens' lovely counterpoint book in my library right here. So
I have that book. And we played several of Hal's pieces in Octava Chamber Orchestra. And then you might know, were you ever part of that composers forum that Hal was on? Compose forums. You remember that one?
Sort of, kind of, a little bit.
It was an internet site where composers would go on and they would argue. Like I was the one, I got into it with some of those guys because there was Ron.
I would have remembered that.
There was Michelle Edward from Canada. And there was Ron. Oh, darn it. What's Ron's last? Ron Brown was another composer up there. Like when I showed up, they would the two of those guys would gang up on any tonally based composer that showed up. They would try to shoot them down and tell them that everything they do is, invalid and all this stuff. So I didn't stand for that. I went to task with those guys. But it seems like the environment's changed quite a bit since then. Like
it's
nowadays,
definitely changed. It definitely. I mean, yeah. Not to only do name dropping. I mean, obviously, this is the first time you and I have met in any sort of vaguely face-to-face contact. We've had email exchanges and have some. But I did want to mention one other name. I wondered, Gavin Borchardt, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I know Gavin.
So yeah. I haven't seen him in 100 gazillion years, but I actually went to college with him, music school in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh, and
I don't think I've seen him for a good 25 or 30 years or something.
Okay, so
I know he's in Seattle, and we exchanged a couple emails here or there.
Yeah, Gavin. Gavin's one of my Facebook friends, among other things.
Yeah.
And also. So, okay, I'm going to back up. We're assuming a lot of stuff right now that everybody supposedly knows. Yeah. But okay, for one thing, the Octava Chamber Orchestra is a chamber orchestra in this greater Seattle area that I co-founded over 10 years ago. I guess it's almost 15 years ago now.
Okay.
With Johann Lauersheimer. And one of the missions that we have is to play a lot of new music. Like especially in the summers, like we're going to play your piece this summer. We're also going to play a piece that I wrote this summer,
which I'm also very thrilled about.
Yeah, and but the reason why I mentioned that is because in our very first concert, we played a piece by Gavin Borchardt.
Ah,
It
I
was a
wonder if I heard it.
it was a beautiful string piece, very tonal,
Okay.
very kind of D major, if you want to
Yes,
call it
I
that.
remember yeah, he wrote generally in that vein for a long while.
Yeah, and I think it was handwritten, like it wasn't done in Finale or Sibelius, because it
Wow.
was rather one of his more early works.
Yeah.
And I think he actually wrote it for one of his friends' weddings. So he played it at their wedding. It was
Nice.
beautiful.
Oh, that's sweet.
And
Okay. Well, thanks for checking in about that. Yeah.
yeah, and
I
he
figured there'd be
also,
a connection.
so Gavin also, the other connection with Gavin is that for many years he was the music critic for the Seattle Weekly, which is it was a big arts newspaper in Seattle. And then now I think he actually writes for the Seattle Times.
Okay.
So, and then
Yeah. Well,
we're way off the track already, but he is also a cellist. So I've actually played some chamber music with him. He and I did some Corelli, where in that situation I played violin, he played cello, and then another composer friend of ours played organ. And so we've done that. I've also played several of his chamber music pieces. Let me think about this. He wrote a trio for, I believe it was for piano, violin, and cello. And get this, the cellist was Julian Schwartz, who's the son of Gerard Schwartz, who was the
I remember.
conductor of Seattle Symphony.
Yeah.
And
I lived in
Julian,
Seattle briefly during his tenure,
okay, and Julian is an
Yeah.
excellent cellist. He's super good. And a really nice guy too. At the time, he was maybe like 18 or 19. So he's probably like in his late 20s now.
That makes
And
a big
also,
difference.
he was also quite a talented young conductor too. So
We
yeah,
we all
so
wear many hats,
we do.
musicians, and yeah, no, I mean, and I feel really lucky that I think for a while up until maybe about 10 years ago, for some reason, I felt like my musical worlds were somewhat compartmentalized, and I had a little
Okay.
trouble. I was sort of, I was a piano teacher. That's always been my day job,
Okay.
pretty much since 1992 or something.
Okay.
And I've often played. I grew up playing, both classical and kind of pop rock jazz stuff. So I kind of had that hat of like playing a lot of rock music
On piano.
on piano and singing, like kind of Beatles
Oh,
cover,
cool.
jazzed up Beatles and stuff.
So you probably
And
play a little guitar too, right?
I play guitar, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had that second hat, and then I was like kind of classical composer type. Like,
Let me do this.
what's going
There.
on? I felt a little
Up
schizo.
there. There's the
Yeah.
guitar right there. Sorry.
But I'm sorry. But the point is, somehow over the last few years, I don't know if it's just perspective, or a little bit of honing in, but life has made it seem like the embracing the variety and feeling like most of my musical activities have some sort of common thread and or feeding each other. So it all seems
Mhm.
like it's kind of coalescing, and I feel really blessed that I can do those things. I really enjoy my piano students. I've got a lot of adult students. Sometimes they play my music.
Great.
They inspire me to write music for them and this or that. And the long and short of it is I feel really in a good place right now
That's
in
great.
my musical life, despite the pandemic and even some positive things, coming to fruition partially, but inadvertently because of the pandemic and
Yeah.
reaching out beyond my little world of Eugene. And so, yeah.
Well, these type of things, these Zoom meetings really have caught on a lot, largely due to COVID.
Right.
Everybody's figured out how to do this.
Yeah.
And
It's harder. Yeah.
so
Hard to make music in person, obviously, but or in real time this way. But
yeah,
we
because
can
it
connect
can't
now.
sync up, is the problem.
Yeah.
But so you have a pretty broad musical interest. Have you done any like film scores or ever thought of doing anything like
I
that?
thought of doing it. I never. I'm a very open that I'm rather a luddite as far as technology goes. So I never. Not that that's it's kind of a cop out reason to not have gone into film scoring,
Mhm.
because I do have an interest in it in theory, and I feel like some of my music could fit in another lifetime maybe.
Okay.
I've done a couple little things, and I've certainly done some video projects, but not film scoring per se.
Right.
It would have been helpful if I had gotten, into the programming earlier on. I was a little bit like Gavin. I wrote by hand up until, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. And I mean, obviously, I use Finale now. Now my penmanship is terrible. It's horrifically sloppy, and I want to go back and try to reclaim that a little bit. It's just been interesting, the whole technology factor. But that's
Yeah.
another story.
Well, I'm
Um,
pretty sure there's still a few old school composers that do everything on paper and then they go and they hire somebody to
that's true.
transcribe it to
That's
Finale or
true.
Sibelius.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, okay. So,
But no,
um,
I'm really looking forward to the concert this summer. I really am excited about that piece that your chamber orchestra
right,
octava is going to take on. So
right. And it's called, your piece is called, it's a refugium. I can't even remember, darn it.
yes,
Is that
exactly,
right?
Refugium. That's
Okay.
pronounced correct, and the subtitle is Snapshots of Denali.
Right.
So
Okay.
this, I could talk about this backstory
Sure.
on that because
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting, and this might be of interest for viewers who are composers um, from around the globe. I don't know if you have heard of this program before that that Stephen Lias, a composer, he's a teacher and based in Texas.
Okay.
Uh, but he, for the past, I'm thinking maybe 12 years now, don't quote me on that, a good chunk of time, every summer, he organizes an incredibly well run program. It was his baby that he combines with Alaska Geographic and the National Park Service in Alaska. He invites about 9 composers from around the globe of various ages and
Mhm.
backgrounds, but mostly kind of more classically oriented composers, to do this sort of field study workshop that's basically like 2 weeks. He calls it sort of like an Iron Chef for composers. Basically, you meet at Denali National Park in Alaska.
Okay.
You spend a couple days hiking around and gathering information with forest rangers and naturalists who know the area really well. And you hike and you experience and hopefully listen for a little bit. And don't come with any preconceptions musically or otherwise. Just
Okay.
try to be a blank slate.
Okay.
And after a couple of days, then you're given you're basically drawing straws and you're given an instrumentation, kind of a strange combination of just like a chamber music group.
Okay.
And I got violin that could double on viola, flute, and percussion. So it was a rather odd trio.
Okay.
So I picked viola,
Okay.
flute, and percussion. And then we were flown to it's a really a wild, wacky scenario. But then, so after we're in Denali and we're kind of gathering some ideas potentially about a piece, maybe,
Hmm.
we are then flown by helicopter, or no, I guess it was a small plane, bush plane, to the Yukon, to Yukon Charlie, like National Monument out in the middle of nowhere, where the mosquitoes were just mind-boggling. It was quite an experience just to be there. And there are these historic cabins along the Yukon River there that used to be up until the 70s, really, a a big mining area that's been
Okay.
abandoned. And basically, you hole up for 3 days and you compose your piece that you were just inspired by in Denali. So this brand new piece, and you write it for 3 days, and you have to finish it, and then you get flown back on the bush plane, and then the players who are all lined up for the Fairbanks. This is really pretty kind of cool, isn't it?
It
Fairbanks
is wild.
Summer Arts Festival. Rehearse your piece very briefly, and then perform it for the public, and people interested in the conservation of the park and the history of the park or whatever. And it got performed twice, and this all happens in the span of 2 weeks. The sort of the inspiration, the writing, and the performance, and then you're done. So basically, what the long and short of it is, it's a fabulous, highly recommended if you can ever or interested
Wow.
anybody out there. He does an incredible job of organizing these things, and I'd never been to Alaska, and it was on my bucket list,
So,
the, and
well,
Denali is phenomenal. But let me just finish my thought real quick. Is that Then I took that little trio,
Uh-huh.
which was a short little piece of a few minutes or something, and then tried to expand it because I really pictured it really as large ensemble and turned it
Right.
into the orchestra piece
That's
that
neat.
has yet to be performed, but
Well,
in in,
soon.
in June.
Just today, well, actually not just today. Well, I think it was yesterday. I got confirmation that we got the hall that we want. So the venue is locked down for sure now.
Oh,
We
this
got
is
it.
just, oh my God, this
So
just warms my heart.
yeah.
Thank you for including me in this. I'm really honored.
Yeah.
I've
So
heard some of the recordings that your orchestra has done, and it's just lovely. I mean, really. And I don't want to detract too much, but I really appreciate the orchestra, and I really have enjoyed what little music I've heard of yours online too.
oh,
I
thank
just want
you.
to say, since we
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to chat yet.
Yeah, it's fun. And it's surprisingly our summer concerts, it's all new music, but it's surprisingly well attended. And I
Wish we
think
didn't have to have that in a sentence like that,
yeah, I know.
but
But
the nature of
it's
it. Yeah.
I think what it is that since there's so many composers in the concert, that each composer brings their own little crowd with them.
Hmm.
So when you got like 8 or 10 composers there and each has their own
Right.
entourage, then
That
that
definitely helps.
builds you a pretty decent audience. I think that's what happens.
In the Denali one, in Fairbanks, it was actually performed at Denali National Park and in Fairbanks itself. It was very well attended, and I think it consistently is because people love nature, and it's also like an annual thing, and they seem to have a curiosity for new music, and what kind of view do composers have? How does that inspire them, that landscape that they know and love dearly, that's in their backyard? So the
Yeah,
locals there are really supportive of it.
that's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. And also the cool thing is, I mean, at least in the composing world that I live in, and the philosophy that I do is like, there's no style that you have to write in anymore. Like it used to be like if you didn't write the kind of music that the university professors approved of during that decade,
Right.
well,
Right.
it would never be played,
Right.
and they wouldn't even let you write it. And so there were these definite styles that happened through the 20th century. And then I think largely because of the internet, a lot of composers just said, the hell with that. I don't want to write that kind of music, and I'm not going to waste my time writing it.
Mhm.
So nowadays
Maybe it's
people
like
are,
cyclical, and who knows the zeitgeist,
yeah.
but yeah,
So nowadays
yeah,
composers write whatever they want, really. I
yeah,
mean, the only
yeah,
time the only people that really have to adhere to that are the ones that are like getting advanced degrees at universities or professors there, and they have a certain reputation that they need to uphold.
yeah. But I think even there, I mean, I'm not directly involved so much, but I do know, some folks in either the student or professor side of that picture,
Mhm.
and I feel like even there, it's really gotten much more inclusive,
Free.
open. Yeah, yeah,
Well, I certainly got that from Hal because Hal was a longtime
mhm,
professor at in Oregon,
yeah,
um, and he was quite open-minded in his
right,
later
right.
years. And so like he approved my music. And like my music is very, a lot of people would say old fashioned. It's very neo-romantic. It's pretty much 19th century with a bit of 20th century thrown in now and then, but not a whole lot really. Because
I
that's
just
kind
think
of music
it's
I like. So
exactly. I think it's so important. Ultimately, I mean, it's great when you're a younger composer, perhaps, or whenever you're exploring how to compose and what yourself is going to be like. But you might try on different hats, and that's kind of exciting. And to, write something in 12-tone style. Let's see what that pushes my button. But
right.
ultimately, you're going to be most successful, I think, as a composer if you write what feels, from your heart and what's a part of your background and your experiences, your DNA,
Yeah.
and it's going to come out more naturally, and people are going to resonate with it more if it's we should all sound different because we're all different people.
Right. Yeah.
and
Like
and
you
I
don't
was
really
just
have to try to sound like like it's not like Mendelssohn wrote a piece and he's like, okay, now I got to make sure this sounds like Mendelssohn. I got to figure out everything I do that makes me sound like Mendelssohn and keep doing that. I mean, those guys did not do that
no, you'd be
at
inspired by
all.
other composers. That's a different
Yeah.
thing, right?
And I mean, they were all aware of different styles and they all tried to compose in certain styles. I mean, even the Beatles tried to compose in a whole bunch of different styles.
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
they
exactly.
did, but yet it still sounds like the Beatles.
Right. That's the style. That's the thing. That's the part of you, and so that's kind of a good thing. I mean, I struggle with it sometimes, making sure that because I write a lot of music. I'm
Mhm.
fairly active doing it, and when I see patterns too much, where I'm like, oh God, that sounds like that other piece I did. I got to be careful that I find that balance between being true to myself and whatever
Mhm.
my style kind of comes out. Because people say we do have a style.
Yeah.
Conversely, I'm always trying to be on the lookout or listening for influences or trying new things and new pieces, new structures, new
Right.
harmonic progressions or modes or whatever, new timbres. I just did a piece. I'd never done this before. I did an ambient music recording recently in the fall. I just decided to do something completely solo without anybody else,
Okay.
which is unusual. I'm very collaborative, and only a recording. That
Ooh,
would
John
be,
Cage type of thing.
well, an ambient, really kind of meditative music.
Okay.
I call it ambient music, kind of like, not gonna say, but in the genre of music for airports or something.
Okay.
An actual long, so two sections, about a half an hour long, meant to be either meditated to,
Hmm.
body work done by, fall to sleep to put you, in a lullaby
Now,
mode.
I'm assuming that if you're writing a piece about meditation, that you actually also meditate.
I used to regularly. I don't actually
Okay.
anymore, no. But I do. I get a lot of body work done. I have an interest in modalities, and actually, I wrote this. I didn't even write this. It's a structured improvisation, so it was very free form, and I
Okay.
just sort of had a flow chart of ideas. I didn't write anything
Okay.
down, and that
Right.
was the fun. That was kind of the experiment for me. Like I've never done that. I went into the studio
Okay.
for a couple hours, and I played a whole bunch of instruments,
Okay.
and did a little bit of sound. Files, what you call it,
Sampled
field recordings,
files. Yeah.
nature sounds and things like that. So
You could say, well, that's a minimalist piece, right? That's what the
exactly,
minimalists do. Yeah.
exactly, and that's something that genre I hadn't really dabbled with
Mhm.
before, but it still, I think, sounds like me.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe too close to it, but
Well, you want to know
but
something funny? My channel is called Pranakasha Productions, right?
yes.
Um, I got that name because I did exactly what you described. I did an ambient piece that was basically this ohm type of sound that I made by multi-tracking like a jillion tracks of a cello playing an open C string, ping
uh,
ponging between two tape
yeah.
recorders, and then it layer upon layer. And pretty soon, because
Yeah,
there's so many
the har-
overtones in a cello,
right, the
all
harmonics
this
are,
huge, all these overtones started coming through
yes,
and all these different
yes.
sounds. And I was like, wow. So I made a CD and I called it Pranakasha,
Oh, I didn't realize that.
the
Oh,
sound of
I'd love to
Om.
hear that. That's very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, there's some similarities to what I did too.
Yeah. And so that's where the name Pranakasha
Interesting,
came
interesting.
from. And Pranakasha Productions was the
I
label that
see.
I created for that CD. And then later
Right,
it became
right.
this.
Gotcha,
So,
gotcha.
anyways, I know all about that stuff.
That's neat.
Yeah. So that's well, I mean,
We're always just on, I'm always on the next project, something to kind of move things
and it's
forward.
what's
Like,
funny is okay, so that's minimalism, right? Yeah. So that's 20th century. Well, you can go into Wagner operas, and there's certain spots where, like, you hear a tonal
right,
chord for 5 minutes,
right, exactly, right.
which is the
It's
exact same
it's
idea.
static. It's static. Yeah, nothing is
Yeah,
new under the sun, right?
yeah,
To some
and
extent, and then it depends on how we cultivate it, maybe.
yeah. So all that stuff is really interesting.
Yeah,
So yeah. So then you also said you had a hurdy-gurdy.
I do.
I
It
want to see
is
this.
okay. Well, I'll bring it out.
Okay.
I warn you ahead of time if I start playing it. Hurdy-gurdies are known to be rather sonorous,
Okay.
but um,
Our
I can
our
show you it first.
our sonoricity threshold will be
Interesting.
channeled. So before you even
So,
play a note, can you
yeah,
describe how a hurdy-gurdy works?
I can. So basically, a hurdy-gurdy is a stringed instrument. It is another name for it is viol de rosa, like a viol, like a violin or viola, basically a string member
A vial.
with a viol
Yeah.
with a circular bow, which is right here. This wheel right here is the
Okay.
circular bow, and this crank moves the bow, the wheel, which acts like a bow, to these various strings that are right here. Some of
Okay.
which are drone strings.
Right.
I even have my little analog board here.
Oh, cool.
Uh, so there are some drone strings that you can either have on or not. And this is the general range of these drone strings from a bass G and the C bass clef, G, and then middle C for most basic hurdy-gurdies. Can you see that
So,
okay?
interestingly enough, those are French words.
True. So I could give, and I will give a handout on if that's okay with you, Matt, afterwards on a PDF that has a nicely done history of the hurdy-gurdy
Yeah, we'll link to it. I'll just put a
by
link in
somebody
the
else, and
thing,
then
and then yeah.
some, yeah, some ideas of mine. But
So you've got a
basically,
gross, which is that's actually German.
the
Then
verbal one, yeah,
petite is small, and
right.
then what's the other one that's in the
The mouche, that I'm not quite sure on.
mouche is French,
Yes,
and
exactly.
trompette
Trompetta.
is French, which
And
means
that's the
trumpet,
most
right?
amazing thing about the Gertie, which you'll hear in a second. That's the one of the key characteristics of the Gertie,
Okay.
which we can mess with. And then the
Okay.
chanterelles are like the obviously the singing melody strings. They're
Singing
the true
chanterelle, that's
sing
singing in French. Yeah.
and those are the ones that actually have tangents in here that act like a guitar fretboard
Okay.
or like a keyboard on the piano. So
Okay.
there's a couple octaves of actual melodic material that is chromatic
Okay.
that you can play, but otherwise the other notes are drones. So you can either
Okay.
have. So
And then what
why
century
don't I
was this
first?
created
Let me
in?
first just. So basically, we know of it. The first kind of like visual painting recordings of it are from around 1,000.
Okay, so it's an
Near 1,000.
ancient
It's an
instrument.
ancient instrument. It was first
Mm.
apparently used with two people playing a large one with in like more of a chant, Christian church kind of atmosphere, and then very quickly it turned into what is very similar to this. I mean, pretty much the same kind of design for a
Okay.
solo person to play. It's had various permutations and connotations over the years between the courts and itinerant musicians, journey people. Its heyday really was France, hence
Okay.
those names there.
French words. Yep.
However, I think people are curious and historians are not totally sure, but it may have initially come over or morphed from various instruments from India or from the
Okay.
Far East, possibly through northern Africa into southern Spain. Could have been, no, seriously, that Andalusia, which is an
Okay.
area of the world I'm really fascinated with,
Okay.
could have been one of the conduits from it to get into Europe. And then from there, it spread all over the place. And, there's traditions of Gertie, or Zanfona is the name of it in Spain. Um, and hurdy-gurdy is the English word for it.
Okay. And
Uh,
then I have two more questions real
yeah,
quick. So,
yeah.
one, do you have to put rosin on that bowed
You
wheel
do.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you have little cotton things here.
Okay. And
I'll
then
be honest with you. I'm not a. Can I just put a preface here? I'm not a Gertie. This is
aficionado.
aficionado,
Okay.
but I have written for it
Great.
for other people to play, and I can tell you about that afterwards.
And
And I
then
do play a little bit.
finally, so you said this was from over 1,000 years ago.
Hmm.
Now, that far back, were bowed instruments even invented yet in the Western world, at least?
I That's a darn good question. I think it may have. I don't know. I don't want to do a complete guess on this, but I think the idea of the drone, kind of like the meditation drone of a chanting kind of
Uh,
background, may have been the key that would have been beforehand. I'm not
okay.
100% sure.
Okay.
I should know that, but it's a good question. A lot of people think it sounds like a bagpipe, but it doesn't. Do you want me to try to play a little bit?
Sure,
Just
go for it.
yeah, and then I can tell you kind of my experiences more with why I was interested in it and kind of other things I've done with it. But let me play just a little something, and then I'll tear apart the strings afterwards.
Yeah.
But this is a piece called Musette, just a traditional
Musette, of
French.
course.
Yes, of course.
Bravo. Okay, so wow. You know what's amazing?
Well, the cool thing is like a sitar, it's got sympathetic strings that you can see here too. So there's that ringing quality at the end, which I think is very interesting.
Keeps going.
Yeah.
And even though it's bowed and there's strings, it sounds surprisingly like a squeeze box type of instrument that basically is reeds, blowing air through reeds, like a harmonium or like a
Right.
those type of things.
Right. Right.
Is it like, of course, that part of it's just over the microphone. But the thing that's interesting to me is like, so, I mean, when you first learn hurdy-gurdy, you're probably taught how to spin it in an absolutely uniform way as much as you can, right?
Right. Right.
But
You want
then,
it to be consistent. Yeah.
after you get past that, then you probably learn how to not do that, to do emphasis when you want, and
Exactly.
do some
Yes.
effects,
Exactly. So that's the trompetta. That's the thing that I don't think any other. There are some other similar instruments like the nickel harp, I guess, and things like that that
Okay.
are vaguely similar, but they don't have the trompetta, which is also called the dog, because it's the barking that you were alluding to, the rhythmic thing.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun,
Right.
dun, dun.
Exactly. Yeah. So that really gives it its character. Although a lot of people, including my gertie virtuoso friend, who maybe I'll talk about in a little while, who lives in
Okay.
Catalonia, Spain, that I've connected with musically, Mark Egia, he does use that a lot. And he's incredible at it. I mean, he has all these rhythmic things he can do that I don't know how to do. But he
Right.
seems to focus more on the tunes, the chanterelles, and really making it a beautiful kind of really kind of a viola range. A lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. In any case,
So interesting.
yeah, I don't want to bug
Okay.
too much about it, but
I have a friend who plays the sarod, which
ah,
is an Indian instrument, which in a sense it's almost like a cross between a sitar and a banjo, except it doesn't have
right.
frets. But one thing
Oh
about the
yeah, 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 yeah. I know what
sarod,
you're talking about. Yep. Hmm.
it's played one thing about the sarod, which is similar to also to the banjo and to the sitar, is again, you have a sympathetic drone type of string, which is usually either the tonic or the dominant,
Right.
that you tend to hit over and
Yes.
over again. And you use that to accompany yourself with different rhythmic patterns, and it can get
Oh, it's like
really,
a built-in tambura kind of.
yeah. And like the guys that get really
Almost.
good, they'll be hitting melodies and go dun 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 dun. They'll be constantly hitting the drone string with these really weird, complex strumming patterns that apparently is really hard to do
Okay.
well. And anyway, it's a
Yeah.
similar idea again of kind of what that trompetta is supposed to do. It sounds like,
The
you know what I'm saying?
trompetas has the rhythmics. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the same thing's true on the
Give it a
banjo.
little
Banjo
kick.
has that high string that's a drone, that you'll tend to throw
Mm-hmm.
in there a lot
Mm-hmm.
just to fill out the sound. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a similar concept that's kind of makes its way through all
Mm-hmm.
these different instruments. It's really interesting.
And this particular
Yeah.
instrument was built by an Oregon luthier who makes exclusively hurdy-gurdies in Southern
Hmm.
Oregon, altar winds,
Hmm.
and apparently they are so booked up, possibly because of the pandemic and people, stumbling upon interesting things like hurdy-gurdies, but they apparently like backed up about 2 years in orders for
That's great.
their gurdies.
Well,
Interesting around the world.
that's funny that you have a luthier that makes no lutes. He should be called a hurdy-gurthier.
Well, I guess yeah. There you go. Where's the drum
Yeah.
kit?
Yeah.
No, I think I was attracted to the instrument. I kind of got interested in it for real about 2 years ago. So how are we similar vintage? Are we about the similar age? I'm 52, 53.
I was born in
You
1966.
66. Okay, I'm a couple
Yeah.
years younger than you.
Yeah.
But I was interested in basically having some sort of new instrument to kind of spark some compositional interest,
Right.
especially one that's more melodically oriented, modal, that kind of thing. And then I
Okay.
flashed back. The first time I really kind of heard a hurdy-gurdy was like 15 years. Not first time I ever heard it, but was really conscious about the sound. I
Hmm.
was in Czech Republic, and just walking along the Charles Bridge, and I heard this, street musician playing, and I was like, wow, that sound is wild. And they were singing with it, and I was like, I think that might be a hurdy-gurdy, I'm not sure. And it just always stuck with me. And it planted that seed. Fast
Yeah.
forward, and I picked that instrument.
But it's funny now with the day of YouTube. I now remember I saw a YouTube video where this guy was playing this really well-known heavy metal song that on a hurdy-gurdy.
Right.
And all the metal people loved it. They were like, oh, this is the coolest thing ever. It's so funny. It was completely unplugged, but it was this sound that just completely like got all the people. It's so funny how gothic heavy metal has become, where it went, and so it's just anyways. So of course, I don't know, you've probably seen there's videos now of people playing Bach and Vivaldi on their amped up electric guitars, and it's all this kind of stuff, all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
So
totally.
wow.
So then a couple years ago, when I was kind of interested in it, in the Gurdy, and I hadn't had one yet, I stumbled upon somebody online.
Okay.
His name is Mark Egia in Spain,
okay.
Catalonia actually, and we kind of just became like email pen pals for a little while. He sent me some of blah blah blah. I liked his music, he liked mine, and I got a chance to actually go over there 3 years ago, and he was nice enough to house me for a day. I even played with. He's a very much a working musician over there. He even got me to sit in on a gig of his.
Great.
And he showed me a little bit of the hurdy-gurdy. But since then, we have, through the pandemic, and partially probably because of the pandemic, wanting to reach out, we've done a couple projects just by, online or whatever, compositionally. The first thing was he tossed out the idea, hey, Paul, maybe we could do like a recording that is, really free improvisation between the two of us, between me on piano and him on the hurdy-gurdy. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a great idea. And it felt right. And we did that, and, kind of released a little album of that where one of us would, I think I started first, actually. I called it like morning improvisations because I just got up. The first thing, I'm kind of a morning person, and I tried to just be as fresh as possible after I have my coffee, and I just put my little Zoom recorder on and just played the piano like the first thing that came to my mind. And then I sent him the MP3, and a couple days later, it was like a little present. He would come back with his Gurdy playing on top of it. And half the time I didn't even sound like the Gurdy because he tends to do a lot of like extended technique Gurdy.
Okay.
Like one thing I thought I could have sworn it was like a pan flute or piccolo or something. It was this weird high harmonic thing. I'm like, are you really playing? But anyway, and we went back and forth, and it was like it took a couple weeks, and we had this suite of more or less free improvisations. I mean, the other person could probably listen to it a couple times and plan something, but it was almost as if it felt like we were just making something up together. So
that's
that was
exciting.
Kind of the first project. It was just really heartwarming to have that connection with somebody else on the other side of the world who was also going through, the pandemic isolation. It was at the beginning of it when we were all kind of really locked down. And I felt thrilled he tossed that out to me. So we did that, and then last year I decided to actually write a more written out kind of complex piece for him to play the hurdy-gurdy, and then cajon drum and bass clarinet. And
cajon, okay, well, just a sec. So cajon, if you guys don't know, is kind of a squeeze box thing, which is this. Do you have one?
I do, the box.
Yeah.
No, I'll just. I can just sit on here for the rest of the time.
It's a lot like an accordion.
Well, no, it's just it's pretty much a box. No, this is.
Cajon.
Cajon. I'm sorry, not a concertina, but is that what you?
Okay, I got mixed up. Okay, cajon. Well, we can talk about that too. So it's a percussion instrument. Yeah.
Just a percussion. Yeah, basically it's the box. It's I think Peruvian based, but kind of like probably initially developed by literally a box.
Right.
That kind of thing. I'm not great at
By the way, I played tablas.
it. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw that.
Yeah, so I know a
Woo!
bit about
Oh my goodness, you
ethnic
would sound good on
percussion.
this. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so so then now I'm confused because there is a squeeze box tango instrument that is, I thought it was called a cajon.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. And it's not a concertina; it's another instrument.
It's similar to a concertina.
But I know. Yeah, I can't remember the name now. But I know it's a very small bandion. Bandion.
Bandion. That's what I was
That's
talking about.
what Piazzolla plays often.
Right.
Yes.
I did a class in tangos not too long ago, and the instructor played it.
Gotcha.
And yeah,
Gotcha.
that's
Yeah.
okay.
Well, this thing, gotcha. So no, this was a very sparse little trio. I wrote it for people that I know because I have a good friend who's a percussionist.
Okay.
So he would play here in Eugene, who would play the cajon, and another good friend who plays the bass clarinet here in Eugene. So basically, we did with my limited tech savvy stuff, we did the recording of those two instruments, and I played a little piano as well at a recording studio here in Eugene, and sent it to Mark, my hurdy-gurdy virtuoso
Right.
friend in Catalonia, and he laid down his track, and it's called Pendulum Palindrome. Uh, La
Is that
Ruta,
online?
it's online. Yep,
Okay, we'll put a link to that too in
that'd
the
be great.
description. So
Appreciate
here's a
it.
question for you. So
Yeah.
in tabla, there's a whole nomenclature for all the different sounds you can make and everything, and so in cajon, is there something like that, or how do you notate it?
There is some system, but I don't think it's very codified. So that's a very good question. I think it's less, since it's less of a tradition, like than the tabla. I think
Hmm.
I know what you're talking about. Then not really. So
Yeah,
I
like
kind of just did it in very simple.
for example, on
Mhm.
tabla, I can do like na ge de tite tun na na ne tati
Mhm.
tati gin ne ke tite tun na na ne da da titi da, and somebody who heard me play that plays tabla could play exactly what I just said.
Right, with the
In fact, you have to
different
learn when you
tones
become
and
a
stuff.
tabla player, you have to learn how to say it before you play it.
The onomatopoeia of it, right? Like, yeah,
Exactly. Because
which is
every
wonderful.
syllable that I
Yeah,
just pronounced is a specific hit, if you want to call it that, on the instrument.
right, right,
And
right,
so
right.
I was
I think there
thinking
are just a
cajon might
few
have
of the
something like
in
that
Cajon.
too.
There are like two or three, that kind of like the mother tongue. There's a couple spots there,
Okay.
but as far as
Kind of
the notation, I think is a little bit loosey goosey.
okay.
And yeah, I don't know that much about it, to be quite honest. I was
Okay.
pretty
Kind of like
pretty mellow about it,
congas,
but
same similar
yeah,
thing. Got a few
yeah,
hits
yeah,
on it.
similar, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
It was it was kind of a little bit more of a heady piece
Okay.
structurally because I was interested, as a lot of composers over the years have been interested in the idea of a palindrome,
Hmm.
somehow making musical. Mine wasn't literally a palindrome,
Okay.
but the overall structure kind of was mirror image, just like in this chunk was this chunk, that kind of thing. This chunk was this chunk, similar. And I did all sorts of other things. I used inverse modes,
Okay.
and I had one little um, oh, what do you call it? What Bach did? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tired by the end of the day.
Inversion.
No, the
A fugue.
counterpoint
A fugue.
that was backward. A canon,
Cannon. Okay.
crab canon,
Crab
crab canon.
cannon. So I was gonna say along those lines, like, well, the one that's the most famous is the Mozart table music. You know that?
I don't know if I do.
Mozart wrote a duet for two violins,
Okay,
and
write this
what you
down.
do is it's on one sheet of paper, and
Oh,
one violinist plays it this
right,
way, and the other one plays
right.
it upside down, and then
Yeah,
they
yeah,
play
yeah.
it. It works.
Right, right, right. It's fun. It's a
Yeah.
compositional. It's a way to structure compositions. I mean, I don't know if you're anything like me, but every piece has a different way of presenting its structure.
Okay.
Sometimes I really write very intuitively, and that sort of
Mm.
organically comes from a structure. This piece, I had from the get-go. I wanted to have various elements that were palindromic in my own
Right.
way, and that kind of gave me a framework to begin with, and then I could kind of fill in the blanks. Um,
Which is
I even used it's basically an instrumental piece, but I used a phrase in Spanish called la ruta natural, which is the same forward as it is backwards. The natural way, or the natural next step.
La ruta, I think, means route.
The route, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. The path. La ruta natural.
¿Habla español?
Un poco.
Un
Poquito.
poquito. Yeah. Sí.
¿Tú? ¿También?
Sí. Yeah. I took French in high school, but then I started watching Univision on cable TV and used that to teach myself Spanish a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I've discovered Spanish and French are pretty similar, at least grammatically. But yeah, now I was going to say something and I forgot what it was. Darn it. Yeah, I lost it.
No worries.
It was something
very profound that we missed there.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I were bilingual. I speak a tiny bit of Spanish. I'm just learning it basically in the past 5 years, and I should speak German because both of my parents are from Austria originally.
Yeah, my dad grew up in.
Keep it up.
My dad spoke German. He grew up in a town in Michigan called Frankenmuth. And everyone in Frankenmuth spoke German as well as English. It was a lot of farmers and people like that.
Were your grandparents from the old country, or?
No, it's actually, I think he was like 4th or 5th generation. So even though I think it was the middle of the 1800s when they all moved over there and did some homesteading and like bought the land for like $1 per acre or something like that. And then they just kept the tradition and they kept a lot of the German traditions and kept speaking German. But the funny thing is that when they would go back to Germany and speak to the Germans, people would laugh at them like, where the hell did you get that accent? Nobody talks like that. Because it, of course, had morphed into some weird American version of something.
Right.
And really, and it struck, what I heard is it struck the Germans as this really backcountry hick type of German, So anyway.
West Virginia. Well, in any case.
Yeah. That's so
interesting. No, I wish I had that, but it's okay. But we I've got music as the other language that's not only it is a language, but it is a way to communicate with people from other countries too. Even if the language is a bit of a barrier. I don't know if have you experienced that. Just I'm sure you have. Playing with.
Well, of course, as a musician. You by de facto you learn a tad of Italian.
True.
Like piano, forte, fortissimo, piemoso, congrazioso, leggero, you swine.
Dementioso.
Yeah. Oh God.
I have some piano students when we talk about diminished chords and augmented chords, and they sometimes get it confused, and it's a demented chord. That whole thing.
So you said you played a little guitar, right?
See, a little bit. Not well. But.
Okay, I wore this shirt, so you probably would get this shirt.
Oh, yes, I can. I know that chord. Thank you. That's a free country. We can.
All right,
that's great.
Should we tell them what it means, or should we leave it to the guitarist to snicker?
I think they can figure it out. Only so many letters out there.
Oh boy. So
now so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I don't suppose you're into Star Trek at all, are you?
I wish I was, because I can't quite appreciate the intricacies of your wonderful episode you did. No. Okay. I'm certainly not anti Star Trek by any means. I just never grew up watching it that much and missed the boat somehow.
Somehow you missed it because I mean you grew up right during it.
This is true. I don't know. I'm not going to blame it on my parents, but I think some things I didn't quite. I mean, I watched TV, but it wasn't quite. It was a little bit off in my own world there, with my parents being from the old country originally.
Okay, I remember. I mean, like when I started first watching Star Trek, I was in 3rd grade and I was 8 years old, so that was like 1974. So it had already been off the air, and now it was in reruns on syndicate stations. And then within one school year, I'd watch every single episode, and I knew everything about Star Trek. But the reason why I brought it up too is because you take the Star Trek music for granted, but I've been going back. I bought some CDs of all the music by the three different composers: Alexander Courage, Sol Kaplan, and Gerard Fried.
Okay.
And I was listening to it and I was like, this is damn good. Like it's really interesting too. It's really experimental. And I'm like, this stuff is great.
Oh, I'm sure,
Yeah.
there's so much good film scoring out there,
Yeah.
and I think that is sort of the gateway drug for an audience to get into new music, right? And contemporary
Yeah.
sounds because it's already in their ears. They know it as, creating the atmosphere for a film
Right.
or television
Well,
show.
there's lots of kids that the reason why they like orchestral music is because of Star Wars
It's true. It's
and the
true.
Star Wars games they played as kids. And you're hearing all this John Williams score through the whole game. You're like, wow, I like that.
Yeah. 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 Well, that's good
So,
stuff. Yeah, we'll take it.
yeah. 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 That's another thing. I think that's another reason
So,
why tonal music, and not just tonal, but I guess you would call traditional sounding music has really made a comeback because a lot largely from film scores and also from video games and stuff that
that's a good point.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
opportunity for composers to write stuff for that and then the kids eat it up and the scores in these games are so good. I mean, I don't play that many
Hmm.
games, but I'll like when my kids are playing them, I'd be listening and I'm like, well, that music sounds damn good.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
it became
Right.
a whole other genre on top of film scores and TV scores. It
Hmm.
was like
Hmm.
scores for video
Right.
games.
That's true. That's true.
So it's just, and that's one thing I picked up from Hal too, is when people would get into these arguments about where's music supposed to be going and what should composer be doing with music, and you should always be looking forward and never looking backwards and all this kind of stuff. His point was, well, before you write a piece, you might want to figure out what the point of this piece is. Like, why are you writing it or what's it for?
Exactly.
And that basically
Hmm.
determines what you're doing,
Yeah. Right. Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Intent and purpose is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that, and I mean, I don't teach a whole lot of composition, but I have piano students who are interested in it, and we talk about it sometimes. And I think the pre-writing is so important. Yeah, to know kind of know who you're writing for, what are you writing, what kind of piece are you writing.
Yeah. And it's
Uh,
like, well, what happens with young composers when they're first starting out is when you're composing something, you're hearing this voice in your head that's telling you you shouldn't do that or you should do this or you shouldn't do this, and like you're trying to please this voice that's, I guess it would be sort of the voice of your professor or your parent or whoever that's yelling at you in your head. And then if you just
right.
compose trying to please that random chatter, you're kind of going nowhere, right?
Right. How do you feel about the of having in the back of your head, in addition to writing, what needs to come out that's hopefully, true to yourself, have a little bit of the audience in mind as well?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
to
also
kind of,
here's what I do. I visualize the musicians that are involved.
yes.
And as much as I can, I try to actually play any of the string parts for sure I play. And then of course and actually a lot of
Right.
times actually compose on the instrument because I'll get inspired and then I can actually a lot of times come up with
Hmm.
something better on the cello or the violin than I can in my
Right.
head. And for
Right.
sure better than on the piano because I'm not that good of a pianist. And so that's another way where you're kind of using your physicality as part of your
Right.
process. Um, but then there's some other things too, like at least I'm really into the idea of the subconscious. And so like the way I compose is um, I get an idea, right? And I start working it. And then I just let it start to percolate. And especially if I get stuck, I'll just go to bed, right?
Right.
And I'll wake up in the middle of the night or the next morning with this new idea
Yeah. Yep.
bubbling up. And it's
Yeah.
like the thing that gets
Exactly.
me, what I've discovered is the more I can follow my instincts and really, it's almost like it's like you're listening to what your subconscious is giving you. And then if you
Mhm.
follow it, learn how to follow it, learn how to nurture it,
Yeah.
just get
Yeah.
it on the page or get it out somehow,
Right.
then you'll realize that,
Right.
whoa, there's a lot to this. Like, surprisingly, a lot of times the counterpoint that comes out of that all works,
Right.
you know,
Right. And the
and
problems
you're
can be
just doing
solved
it
sort of by yeah.
because, and my theory is basically your subconscious mind has worked it out. It's like a
Totally.
computer
I
that's
totally
been
agree. I,
doing it. And the thing is
yeah.
to just try to
Yes.
get it, just try and
Hmm.
nurture it and then just
Yeah.
help it come out. So that's
I
why I
totally
never
agree.
feel
I haven't.
guilty.
Yeah.
What happens to me sometimes is I'll write a piece and then halfway through I'll shelve it and I won't get back to it for years. But but the theory is that during all that time, whether I know it or not, my
Yeah.
subconscious is working on that piece. So when I finally get
Yeah.
back to it, it usually comes out really fast, the end
Well,
of it, the rest of it,
right. Right.
and it's all really good. So I
Yeah.
think, to
Oh,
me,
that's
that's the
great. That's
ideal
great.
way
No,
of
I've had
preparing to
moments like that too.
compose.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I take a lot of walks. I feel like I get a lot of musical, if I'm in the process of a piece, in the midst of it, take a
mhm,
break, you know, the sheer act of just getting out and walking, um, take that,
right.
that takes your mind off. That is a meditation in a sense. Similar things happen to what you're talking about. I
Plus,
call it like the Beethoven effect.
walking,
Mhm.
walking itself has a certain rhythm to it, and so that can kind of get you
Right.
into a rhythmic pulse that can kind of get the juices flowing too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
tricks. And then,
Yeah.
well, what you said too, and what you do is what a lot of composers, poets, any kind of artists do. Sometimes you will set up sort of an arbitrary structure that you want to put yourself in some kind of box, right?
Mhm. Limitations, have some limitations, right?
Right. But the challenge is then to work within it. And then that act surprisingly, that limitation creates a
Yeah.
new kind of freedom because it gets you
Yeah.
out of your usual
Yeah.
mold,
Yeah.
you know.
I
So
remember hearing
that's
some sort of NPR segment about that, about some studies done about that. Sort of
yeah.
like the Keith Jarrett Cone concert and having the limitation of a piano that was not up to his snuff. He was about ready to shelve the concert. The piano wasn't quite right, but he worked around it, and it became this,
This thing.
very this thing.
Speaking of that,
So
did you ever see that Alma Deutscher video where she did the hat trick? Have you heard of her, Alma Deutscher?
don't believe.
She's this young kid, this super genius pianist kid. But now I think she's like 15 or 16 years old, or maybe even older. She plays violin and piano. And anyways, when she was like 8 years old, she was a composer already. She's kind of a Mozart type. Like when she was 5, she was writing pieces and playing on piano, and they were damn good.
Oh, maybe I know. Was she profiled on 60 Minutes at one point?
Yeah, and what they
Okay.
did a trick. We're like, okay, here's a hat. We have a hat with a bunch of random notes in it, and we're gonna pick out 4 notes, and we're gonna give them to you. And then what can you do with it? And then
Right.
so she did it, and then she right on the spot composed a really nice little piano sonata, first movement that was like 4 minutes long, or maybe 2 minutes. It seemed like 4,
Right.
based on these random notes, and it was damn good.
Hmm.
I mean, I listened
Yeah.
to it and I was like, you know what? I would be proud if I spent an entire day trying to figure out this piece with those 4 notes
Yeah.
that this kid just rattled off in 2 minutes. So there you go. Another one of those
Yeah.
little techniques. So yeah. So you probably also then do you agonize over pieces that you write, or do you write them pretty fast and then they're done?
I'm a kind of a middle of the road person in a lot of ways in my life in
Okay.
general, I feel like. So I'd say I'm kind of middle of the road. I take my time. I generally like to do a little work at a time rather than kind of go, crazy for one chunk and, or a last minute deadline kind of thing.
Mhm.
Pace myself. And I do edit much more detailedly than I used to and agonize a little bit more than I used to,
Okay.
which I think is good. Good to be critical as
Right.
best I can. But at a certain point, I kind of like, I think I've done all I needed to as far
It's
as
done.
I'm reasonably happy enough. I could, I'm sure, yeah, and put it
Okay.
aside. I think compared to a lot of composers, I don't agonize over every little eighth note in it, And I say, oh, I'm going to work on something the next time and hopefully improve on certain aspects of my craft next time and put it in the next piece. I may come back to something and rewrite it a little bit later on, but
Right.
in general, I kind of like, okay, a that's a journal entry. That's kind of a point in time,
Right.
you know. Yeah, I tend to
Yeah.
be more like that. I don't know about you, but
I think that's the best. Well, I mean, like if you go back and look at like any of the great composers, just the sheer amount of music that they put out means that they didn't look back.
right,
They were
right,
like writing practically every day.
right, right.
And then you got guys
It was a
like
different,
Mozart and Bach, and it's all good.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they're just like writing whatever is coming into their brain. I mean, but also they're also doing all these tricks. They are figuring things
It
out
was a
and they are
different time
challenging
period too, but
themselves too. But in the end, they've also learned how to write quick.
mhm,
You can't, like, there's no way
yeah,
you can write umpteen
right.
operas and spend
I mean,
hours and hours over one aria, you know?
right, right. I mean, there are times when if I'm just about done with a piece, then I'm kind of I don't even know if I like it anymore or if it's any
Yeah.
good. You know, I'm too in it
Yeah.
and I don't have any perspective at all. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I got to
Let
leave
it
this for a
go.
while. Don't think about it for a while, and then have some perspective. And maybe down the road, I'll listen to it and say, oh, that wasn't so bad,
Yeah.
or that's
Okay.
really
Oh,
terrible, or actually, that was very successful.
yeah. Okay, this I wanted to bring this up before, but like the thing that I find really fascinating is like if I listen to a piece by Tchaikovsky, like within 5 seconds, I'm like, well, that's Tchaikovsky. Yeah, I can hear him through, like, even if you hear like one of his melodies that isn't even harmonized, you just hear the melody and you're like, wow, that's a Tchaikovsky melody. And I think that is so fascinating because when you try to break it down, you're like, well, he's using the same chords as everyone else. He's using the same techniques that everybody else is using, yet it sounds like Tchaikovsky. So what is it that somehow gets him into that music? It's really, it's like,
Sure.
it's amazing,
Yeah,
actually.
inexplicable. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
And the only
Probably
way I
no
can,
easy answer on
I mean, I guess it's what it is. It's got to
that.
be in the tiny little details. There's tiny little
Right.
things.
Time, timing, phrasing, little twists here or there or something or
And then our musical sensibility is so refined that we turn those tiny little details into, that's Tchaikovsky.
Mhm,
And we create that sensation of Tchaikovsky.
mhm, mhm,
You know, that kind of stuff I find really super fascinating,
mhm, mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, like
I
we were
mean,
talking about, even when a composer is trying to imitate another composer, it ends up still sounding like the first composer. Like when the Beatles tried to imitate whatever other band it was,
right.
it ended up sounding like the
Motown or
Beatles.
Tim
Yeah,
Panelli or whatever. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's
So
good. Yeah.
yeah. So that's, I mean, that gets into that whole thing. Like there was this thing back, I guess it was in the 70s, where like they were so down on people being derivative. Like that's so derivative. You have to write something original.
Mm. Do
And
you
like
mean in the more in the classical world, or are we
yeah.
talking? Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
And pop, I mean, if you write something totally out there, nobody's going to listen to it.
Exactly.
So
I found that out.
it has to be derived from something.
That's what it's interesting because
Right.
like when I was not to interject too much, but when we talked earlier and I said I used to have these compartmentalized hats that I wore that didn't seem to have any connection with each other, and when I was in the more rock, for lack of a better word, genre, my stuff was just too far out there in a sense, too complicated and too prog rocky to be very accessible, I think, and so I feel like I kind of made the right shift. It almost feels like you do kind of need one avenue or something to be a part of. I mean, there's lots of
Yeah.
crossover, but I feel like I'm kind of at this point I'm more of a contemporary classical musician composer who is very comfortable in other genres, and
Mhm.
I get a lot of influences from rock and jazz and
Okay.
world music or whatnot,
Um,
as opposed to being in the rock camp and and going the other direction. Although obviously a lot of people have done it that way too.
well, okay. Since you brought
So
up rock, I mean, now rock's been around a long time and it means a lot. It's got a lot
that
of,
means something
it's a
different.
lot of different things. But when you say rock, I think like Queen, Van
Right.
Halen, Led Zeppelin,
Mm, mm.
all these bands that actually are very heavily influenced by jazz and blues, and then a lot of experimental stuff. You got Rush, Pink
Mhm.
Floyd,
Oh yeah,
all those
Led
guys.
Zeppelin.
They were doing
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff with it,
Mhm.
you know, and music and
Right. Right.
Boston,
Yeah. But yeah. Yeah.
Sticks, all those
Yeah.
those, and even Heart. I just listened to just the other day. I listened to Magic Man. Do you know that song?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which has like a 5 minute
Well,
guitar solo in it. And then when you think it's over, it suddenly keeps going for another 2 minutes. But it totally fits the song. And I'm like, this is so cool. This is a pop song. And yet
oh yeah.
listen to what's going
There's some
on in the
great
song.
structural things going on. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. You find those gems. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah. Well, it was like it's all good music. There can be great music in any genre. I mean, I
yeah.
love all sorts of things. When we're lucky at this time in our world, not only we have all these hundreds of years of history of music, but we've got the, as you said before, we got the internet at our disposal and just the plethora of
Yeah.
maybe it's
Anything's possible.
overwhelming, maybe too much. Back in 1900, it was like the exposition came to you, and maybe somebody
That
like
was it.
WSP
Yeah.
got excited by Gamma
Well, okay.
line.
So I'm going to keep going a little bit. I mean, even if you get into grunge, if you actually listen to the chords they're playing in a lot of grunge bands like Soundgarden or whatever, they're playing a
Okay.
lot of really jazzy chords. It's just harder to tell because it's all overblown and
All
distorted.
distorted.
But if you listen closely, you're like, well, that was like some weird ninth or 13th
Mhm.
chord.
Mhm.
And then, so it's not just your typical 3 bar song, 3 chord song. There's a lot of really wild harmonic stuff that's going on. And then
But yeah,
Soundgarden also
and then
did a
there's
lot
the
of complex rhythms and time signatures too, and things that you wouldn't expect in pop. And then you sort of take it for granted because it's pop and like guitar until you listen to it and analyze it, like, whoa, that was in like 7/8,
Mhm.
or that was 11
Mhm.
8 or whatever, and they did a whole song in that. So obviously
Mhm.
the guys went to music school,
Mhm.
and had a fair amount of training.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah.
so,
And then conversely, sometimes the most, memorable musical moments, whether of any genre, are the most simple,
yeah,
bare stripped down, really simple material just that speaks to you.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So well, okay, so
uh,
your Refugium, we're gonna hear it this summer, and then it's based on the trio, and then obviously expanded it and gave it a whole orchestra, and it's going to
yeah, I got inspired by a poem, or not. I think I wrote the poem. That's right. I wrote the poem while I was there in Denali, inspired by one of the park rangers' um, thoughts
so that
on
whole
nature there.
concept is
So
totally 19th
very
century.
programmatic.
So that's completely 19th century romanticism, to be inspired by nature, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe it's universal.
yeah,
Yeah.
neat.
So yeah,
Okay.
and I'll do a little plug here for Cascadia Composers, and you're a
Yeah.
member as well, aren't you?
I
Friends
am,
for
but I'm
life.
I'm really not active. I'm on the mailing list, but that's about it.
Okay.
I've
No worries.
I never
I'll
really
harass you later,
participated.
Matt.
Okay. So
But
okay. So
I'm one of the I've been active with them pretty much from the inception, 12 years ago or however long it's been now, 13,
okay.
14 years, and we're the largest chapter of NACUSA, the National Association of Composers USA. There are
Okay.
multiple chapters of this around the country, and the Cascadia chapter, which is mostly composers from Oregon and Southern Washington and Northern
Composers from
California.
Cascadia. So once we
If
finally
Cascadia
secede,
Biomarine,
once we
right?
finally secede from the USA and we create our own nation, then we'll have our composers and we can all get together and make a
Have our
national
soundtrack.
anthem. Our national anthem is gonna kick the current one's butt. It's gonna be about evergreen trees and seagulls and salmon, those kinds of things.
Coffee and microbrews
Yeah, yeah,
and
we're
a
not gonna have
pot shop on
microbrews.
every corner. But
Yeah, pot shop.
there we go. But we're about 80 members strong, and we have a very active season collaborating with various groups. It's Portland
Right.
based. We've done
That's great.
concerts here in Eugene, and there are members in Eugene, but most of our stuff happens in Portland.
That's
So
great.
I feel really, just lucky to be a part of that group, and appreciate
That's
appreciate
great.
Yeah, we've got concerts coming
Yeah.
up.
Well, I have you. Are you aware of the Facebook group that's just called Composers?
No.
Well, there's one out there, and it's got like 22,000
Go
members
figure.
now, and
Okay.
it's got over 20,000 members. And I actually created it by accident many years ago. I was trying to create. I was messing
You just
around with
pushed the wrong
Facebook.
button.
Yeah, well, here's what happened: is I knew like 10 or 20 composer friends, right? That were all my Facebook friends. And I'm like, well, I got to categorize these guys so I can keep track of them. So I'll create a group of my Facebook friends and I'll put them in this group called Composers, right? I didn't realize it was a public group. So they all joined it. And then their friends joined it. Like the next day, there was 100 people in it. And then the next day, like 200. And it just mushroomed. And next thing I knew, there was like 1,000 people in this group, all talking to each other, sharing their music with each other. So now it's like 20,000 composers from all over the world.
If only you could have done it for good instead of evil. But no, that's a great story actually. Well, there are a lot of composers out. Oh my
There
goodness,
are
there are, and a lot of really fine composers.
tons of great
Some
composers.
interesting people doing interesting things.
Yeah. And I find it really, I mean, when I was younger and I was a kid, I was like, you always wanted to be the best. So when you found other good composers, like it made you feel bad in a certain way. But now it's the total opposite. Now I'm like, I'm just fascinated on how many good musicians there are, how many good composers, and like it just makes me want to be that much better.
Right, right.
But I
Yeah.
really love being part of a community of people that are just super
That's great.
talented.
That's great. That's
You
great. Well,
know?
it's so nice to meet you finally and
Yeah, you too.
get a chance
That's
to chat a little bit. And
Yep,
I know we'll meet up in person this summer. You
we
know,
will.
we will.
Very much so. And so I'm actually going to be the soloist in my piece because it's cello concerto.
Great.
And then my conducting teacher is going to be the conductor of it. And then I'm also going to conduct a piece. So I might end up conducting your piece, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Okay.
Unless you want to conduct it.
Let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
Probably not. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know how good of a conductor you are, but
I'm
like
not
if
that experienced. You know, sometimes, and ideally, it
okay.
is kind of nice to be able to do that. I've been there before, but I probably would be too nervous.
Okay. Then
Yeah.
I can do it.
Thank you for the offer, though. I
Yeah.
appreciate
I did find though, I'm going to make a plug for this, that once I started taking conducting lessons,
it. Mm-hmm.
that really helped my composing, especially orchestrating and stuff. Because it's just the same thing. Like when
Yeah.
you play, like if I write a cello piece, if I know how to play the cello,
Right.
automatically the piece is going to be better. And it's going to fit the cello better. Same thing. Once I've learned how to
Right.
conduct,
Right.
I'm really now when I'm writing a piece, I'm like, okay, now how would you actually do this? Maybe I should write this in a different meter
you're in
or
the organism in a way. Yeah.
yeah. Or sometimes I'm like, the horns aren't going to be able to play that very well, but if I give it to the bassoons, it'll sound way better. Or maybe just mix the
Right.
bassoons with the horn, stuff like all these little tricks
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
conductors know. I started to learn, and it
Makes
helped
sense.
my orchestration and
Makes
composing.
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Like Mahler. I mean.
Yeah, Strauss. I mean, there's no way any of Strauss's music would ever have been performed if he wasn't the one who was going to conduct it. So you look at the score and you're like, this is insane. No orchestra could ever play this. So, but he knew he could because he
Mm-hmm.
proved it could be done. So now
Right.
people
Right.
know they do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, well, let's wrap it up. Is there anything else? So Cascadia, your piece, the upcoming concert in June up here in Seattle, the HurdyGurdy.
Yeah. The
Um,
HurdyGurdy.
oh, I was going to ask you
Any
this.
other plugs?
So when you did your HurdyGurdy piano collaboration, did you think do you play harpsichord at all?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was gonna think like I wonder if a earlier music instrument would fit with the HurdyGurdy
Would
better or
fit that.
not.
Yeah. I did a little bit of prepared piano inside there, but not much.
Okay.
To kind of go with his extended technique. But
I don't
would be a neat
suppose you
sound.
play or like Hamlet Dulcimer or anything like that.
You know, I not a kind of, not really. There's a little bit of that on my ambient music actually, but not really. No,
Okay.
no, I'm not that much of a multi-instrumentalist. I'm really a piano teacher. Simple, and I enjoy it. I've written a lot of piano and vocal music. My wife has done a lot of singing, so I wrote a lot of art songs for her.
Oh, neat.
I've written a lot for string quartet, partially because of our wonderful, I don't know if you've heard of them up in Seattle, but I'll do one more plug.
Okay.
Our wonderful Delgani String Quartet is
Great.
a Eugene-based string quartet professional group that's really considered Oregon's finest chamber ensemble,
Great.
and they're fantastic. And I was lucky to kind of get in on them when they were starting up, and I've done a lot of collaborations with them and spoken word with an orator
Oh,
who
cool.
takes standard text. We did our big thing was the Telltale Heart,
Oh,
the Poe
wow.
short story. So and I put set music to
Edgar
that.
Allan Poe. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a video on my website about with that, and I think the orator's fantastic, and it was written for this Delgani string quartet. So if they ever get a chance, they play up in Portland, but I'm not sure if they've gone as far
Yeah.
as Seattle. But if they ever do, please check them out. They're incredibly tight, and they have a really cool sense of programming too,
Yeah.
the
String,
classics and new music.
a string quartet is just very versatile group. And well, I mean, like you can. I play in a trio, which is basically a string quartet without a viola. Sometimes we add a viola, but we do all kinds of arrangements. Like we've done Beethoven's Fifth Symphony arranged for string trio, and it sounds good. So you can do it if you do it right. And we used to play it on the street, like down a Pike Place Market. We'd play on the
Oh, that's
street. People would
great.
throw money in our cases, and people would
Oh,
dig it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so important. Well,
Same thing.
just to be
Also,
out
another
there.
thing we do in Seattle is we haven't because of COVID, but we would have this Mozart Requiem sing along at at Folklife Festival at Seattle Center,
Oh, really?
where all these people from different choirs would come, and we would just sight read the whole entire Mozart Requiem, and the orchestra was a string quartet, maybe a
Yeah.
timpani, and maybe a couple of clarinets, but it
That's
worked great.
oh, that's
Yeah, and I would
fantastic.
always play first violin in the string quartet.
Power
It
to
was
the
a
people.
blast.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
At Folklife Festival.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
I
That's
remember when I did it like
awesome.
5 years in a row, and the first time I heard about it, I'm like, this will never fly. Mozart Requiem sing along. It's gonna sound. What a
It's
horrible
an
idea.
oxymoron.
I know, but we did it. We went and did it. I was like, wow, that was fun,
That's
and
great.
it sounded really good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because
we got to keep.
obviously the people in the choir had at some point learned it, you
Yeah.
know.
Well,
So
let's hope the pandemic subsides enough to get back to this kind of music making because I
yeah,
think it's so important. People
yeah,
are
it's really
craving
fun.
it too. So, well, thank you so much for having this series and having me on here today. It's been
Thank
a
you, sir.
real pleasure getting to know you a little bit more, and
Very good.
we'll
And
we'll
then
catch
just
up
send me
soon.
all kinds of links to your stuff, like YouTube
Okay.
channel, your website, any kind of music that you want me to link
Okay.
to, and I'll put it
Well,
all
thank
down
you.
in the description, and people can click on it and check it out, and
Wonderful.
be
I've really
great.
enjoyed your other guests. So thanks so much,
Yeah.
and all you composers who might be out there or music appreciators. We need everybody in this group effort. For new music and looking back at the old and moving forward.
Yeah.
So well, thanks a
That's
bunch,
great.
and you have a great evening, Matt.
All right,
And
Paul.
you
Take
take good
care.
care. Okay.
Pranakasha Production. Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life.
For the benefit of all beings everywhere.
We gotta change.